How have you used social media to improve a healthy corporate culture, and what are your concerns about social media having a negative impact on employee health?
I don't think we use our social media for our health and wellness, for our employees. That's a little bit more towards our fans. Certainly, we like to show how we are part of our community and some of the things that we do. So I know, we've partnered for many years doing the Play 60, the NFL's program to get kids up and moving. We had 11,000 kids participate last year. We're in 650 different classrooms this year. It's been a wonderful, wonderful campaign that has really brought, like we talked about, as we've gotten busier, and so has, now both parents are working, and kids sometimes, often, it's not the priority as it was anymore. I don't know about you guys, but it was like, go play, and then, we'd all go play around the neighborhood, and now it's not so much with video games and things like that. So I think trying to highlight great initiatives that our company does in their community, as well as, I think that also helps our staff just understand where we are putting our importance and what's important to us, and certainly the health and wellness of kids and getting healthy habits early on is very important to us.
Dr. Kropp?
Yeah, one example I think that works well is the wellness challenge that we do with the Bills, that we've had tens of thousands of people participate in that. And I'm not a big social media fan, and I don't really know how to use it. But, one thing that I think we try to do is to use social media to bring people in to help them feel like they're a part of something. And so use it as a platform for engagement. And so if people can talk about what they've done, but do it in such a way that they're part of a bigger movement, that is pretty powerful. And that is the extent of my knowledge about social media.
No, but it's simple but effective. Jason?
We talked about this a little bit earlier with technology. I think when I think about my own kids, the data is pretty clear. You want to limit social media young. And like anything, wait until you're old enough to understand what you can get out of it versus how to not get sucked in. So I think it's a great resource, great information, and when you're looking for an answer to something, you find it pretty quickly and you can engage with people. But I think it's also important to guide people to realize that it's a waste of time to post a bunch of junk about your life all the time, and you're better off just having conversations with people face to face, both for kids and adults.
Dr. Kropp, why is increasing the number and retention of primary care doctors in Western New York so crucial for our community?
Oh boy, I guess that'll be the last question of the morning. There's literature that abounds, whether it's in the United States or across the world, that really reinforces the fact that when there is a strong primary care capacity in the community that's working well, then the community's healthier. And for us, health is a part of the overall equation that we look at. Years ago, the fellow who headed up CMS, the government payer for Medicare and Medicaid, coined this phrase, the triple aim. And triple aim is about better health, better experience of healthcare, and more affordable healthcare. And so communities that have really high functioning and adequate capacity of primary care do better in achieving that triple aim. So that's irrefutable. We as a community are challenged in terms of our primary care capacity now. That when you look at the ratios of primary care physicians to residents, we're below the New York State average and well below the national average. And the average age of the primary care workforce in this community is mid to late 50s. So we're sort of headed towards a cliff if nothing is done around that. Now, the other fact that I think people need to consider is that when we talk about the triple aim and we talk about affordability as a component of that, as well as the health pieces, given the rising costs of healthcare nationally, which typically have gone up at 5% per annum in spite of everybody's best efforts, when you're talking about typical economic growth rates being 2%, healthcare is just completely dominating the costs of doing business. And so communities that can achieve the triple aim are actually going to be strong economic communities because you've got a healthier workforce, you've got more affordability, so dollars can go to other social goods that don't have to go to healthcare. So this is part of what we believe in strongly and part of the investments that we've been making for the last 20 years. And we're starting to see some huge turnaround in this area where primary care physicians are now able to experience a professional work life that's much more fulfilling. Typically primary care physicians have been paid far less than specialists. And so when you think about graduating medical school with $200,000 to $300,000 in debt, and you can think about being an orthopedic surgeon to make $750,000 or a primary care physician to make less than $200,000. So we've helped these primary care physicians turn things around so that their professional lives are so much more fulfilling, they're doing better economically, and they don't face that stark choice coming out of medical school. So it's a much more attractive specialty. But this is a journey. We've been on it for 20 years. It's going to take another 10 to 20 to accomplish what we need to, but we feel it's something that's absolutely essential for this community for those reasons.
Kim, what's happening in the new Western New York that gives you hope, and what concerns you?
Well, what gives us hope? I saw it this weekend, and so it's not hope because Tara and I, we've always felt it was here. It was just sometimes buried on weekends, but certainly it was so gratifying to see the amount of fans that we had in Nashville, to see the fans that came out Saturday night for the Sabres home opener, not always have given a product on the field that was worthy of their loyalty, but there are still communities. I know, Jason, you live out in California, and it's a little bit different lifestyle, and I've been to different conferences where they talked about, the next generation, and it's almost like a huge fear of the technology that we're going to be able to do. And while some of that is really wonderful and it's going to move the human race along, it's nice to know that there's still communities like Buffalo, like Western New York, where the values are much more important than the technology that we have, and that the people here really care about increasing the rate and getting things better, providing and serving our community. So that always gives me a lot of hope, because there's always, it's just, and none of that it gets manifested on game day, because the pride and the, the engagement that this community has with not just sports, but I feel like with all things, whenever there's a special event or something comes, I feel like everybody in this community always supports each other in many different ways. So that always gives me a lot of hope that we are still a community here, and that regardless of what's going outside the political, social things, that this community still stands together pretty tight. And what am I concerned about? Oh my goodness. I'm probably going to say, kids. It's my kids are grown. My youngest is 20. But they're always your kids, right? But there's so many challenges out there for children. Sorry, Jason. There's so many challenges out there, and some of that we don't even know yet are coming. So just worried. How we deal with those challenges with our kids. What's going out there, that a lot of the things that we can't necessarily control. So that would be my biggest concern.
Dr. Kropp, any along those lines, things that are happening here in Western New York that give you hope and or what concerns you?
I share Kim's view on hope that this community is amazing. You know, its ability to rally. You know, I think about that Thanksgiving snowstorm years ago when, you know, people driving through and people just took them off the roads into their homes. You know, total strangers. And you know, what we did with Andy Dalton and $400,000 to another community. It's, when we were out at the stadium talking about the kids and you know, looking at the national challenge that we have with obesity and childhood obesity, and somebody asked, you know, is it unique to Buffalo? I said, no, it's not unique to Buffalo. Every community is facing similar challenges. But what's unique to Buffalo is the ability that we have to come together as a community to address it, that most communities won't be able to do. And you know, the recognition that, hey, we all bring something to the table, but our ability to sort of sit down with one another, listen, understand, you know, what each party brings to the table, and then work across organizations and across the community, that's unique. It doesn't happen in a lot of communities. So, you know, I'm really, really hopeful for our community on that basis. I think I share Kim's challenges in terms of the kids. You know, we have a challenge in terms of the level of poverty that exists in this community, and yet, you know, every kid deserves an opportunity to grow up to be everything that they can be. And, you know, fully a third of our community, those kids just don't have that opportunity right now. And until we have, you know, a safety net across the community to give kids the opportunity to be exposed to the right environments, the right mentors, the right opportunities to eat healthier, to live better, you know, we're still going to struggle. And so I think that as a community, if we take what's hopeful in terms of our ability to rally together and then address the challenge that we have in terms of those kids who haven't had the opportunity, then we can do something really special here.
All right, for all of you, we'll start with Jason. What do you do as a successful leader to help yourself as you individually continue to grow and develop?
Well, I have to say something about the Buffalo thing before I go into that. So, I don't want everybody to think that I'm just a California boy. They say at my company they can't take the Buffalo out of the boy, so I definitely brought this. Just and I did want to comment that I've made reference to it a bunch of times, but One Buffalo, that whole thing is really cool. Like, you know, I experienced it from a different vantage point being out in California, and you know, a lot of the national media love to joke about the Bills and all this stuff before, but you know, when they talk about them now, they talk about the team's heart, they talk about the grit, but they talk about the community. And aside from people jumping through tables, which is the one blemish on all things Buffalo at the moment, everything else is about how the community comes together. And I just repeat what Mike said too about this is a community that can come together to take action. There's a lot of challenges to overcome, especially with children who grow up poor or with exposure to potential drugs, opioids, and then the current political climate. It's all a mess. But if our values shine through, which I think is the heart of Western New York, then this next generation of kids here is going to be great too. So Brian, sorry, I didn't answer your question. So your question's about as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, how, obviously you're all in positions of being successful leaders. How do you help yourself as you individually, you know, continue to grow and develop?
Yeah, whole big topic, but I will say, just to be really candid, leadership is also very stressful. It's very stressful. There's a lot of weight on your shoulders. People, the more successful you become, the more your failures are magnified, and then you still go home and you have 3 little kids. So it's important to take care of yourself, and I think that's about surrounding yourself with good people that you look up to, that provide you love, giving them a lot of love, and it's really reciprocal, and also taking quiet time. One of my board members gives me great advice. It's like, you need to bake more thinking time into your schedule, because it's really tempting to just like cross more stuff off the list and then add more and cross more stuff off. But every week I try to give myself time where I just am quiet, reflective, and then it's just sleep, good nutrition, and physical activity. Is easier said than done, but just keep coming back to that loop and refreshing every week.
I think for me, I like to do things that I wouldn't typically do, so challenge myself all the time. I enjoy I'm on a public board of a public company, so it's a new area that I haven't been in before, but you know what I said, I want to take the time because there's so much learning to be outside of your normal day-to-day, outside of what you know and the people that you know, and just kind of taking that leap and learning from different people that you don't intersect with on a day-to-day basis. As well as, I like to join committees because for the same reason, just to get a different perspective and to go outside of what I think I know and to hear from other people with vast different experiences than I have. So that's how I like to think that I grow as a leader, is by engaging with people outside of kind of my normal day-to-day.
I think that we belonging to the organizations that we belong to, we get exposed to great ideas and great thinkers. And the other thing that I like to do, and one of the reasons I don't spin as much as I used to, is when I take the dogs for a walk or I get on the elliptical, I listen to podcasts, and it's probably the bane of my team's existence, is because I'll listen to this podcast and come back and say, "Oh, this is really cool. We got to try this." But there are a couple of podcasts that I just keep coming back to, and the one that probably most consistently is more of a spiritual podcast called On Being, where Krista Tippett interviews spiritual leaders. She'll interview poets and priests and rabbis and lamas, and it's just as you're exercising, kind of you let your body take care of itself, but your mind is kind of washing over in their thoughts, which is really, really cool. And then Curious Minds is always a great sort of idea for business. That's the one that's the bane of my team's existence, because keep coming back, and we need to take a look at this sort of thing. So that really helps me sort of expand my thinking. But the other thing is sort of love to step out and take risks, not physical risks. I'm not a very adventurous person in that way, but taking risks in what we do. And I like to think that more of the risks that we take are smart risks, but encouraging folks to just try some new things and see, and making sure that we've got that environment that people feel safe about taking the risks, because it's all about learning. And what we really want to see is that all of our associates are all about learning and growing. And the more we can do that, the more we can model that, I think, the better off we are.
All right, a couple of quick text questions to answer. Hopefully, maybe not the easiest one, especially when you're being put on the spot. What famous person, dead or alive, do you admire for their respect for the new golden rule, and why?
I mentioned earlier Stephen Covey's Fifth Habit. His other 6 aren't so bad either. But I think that he took things that very sort of commonsensical and sort of distilled them down into a method which people could adopt very easily. And I think that his principles really speak to humanity and humanity and purpose. And I think that he's somebody that I've always felt the lessons that he imparts are very powerful, not just for business, but for living a life as well.
Jason, anyone?
I could go Aristotle or Hippocrates here, but I'll go with a more famous local philosopher, Marv Levy, who, again, I think there's interesting parallels with Coach McDermott and Marv Levy, but they really invested in culture. But there's a quote, I'll paraphrase it. He talks about how he was out with his father, and they were hunting, and they were shooting a bird. And then he stepped back and he reflected, like, why would someone find joy in shooting an animal that was as happy as I was when it woke up? And, it's no commentary on hunting or anything. It was more just like a reflection on, like, caring about, your fellow beings. And, I think that's the theme of today, and I really appreciate that that's, like, coming out in Buffalo more and more again.
Kim, you have one?
I don't know if I have one in particular. I feel like, different people that I come in contact with, they all have different needs, and some, good thought here, but some of them work on some people, so other ones don't. So I don't really have one specific person that I would kind of really idolize.
Mike?
There's one more that I was thinking of as Jason was talking, and his name is Bertrand Russell, and I don't know much about him other than a quote that he had. I think he was an English philosopher, but he talked about 3 driving forces in his life. One is kind of the search for love. The second was the search for knowledge. And the third, he framed it slightly differently. He talked about not being able to sort of tolerate the vast inequities that he saw existing in the world. And I think about that slightly differently in terms of, when you see inequities, the drive to be able to do something to right them. Mm-hmm. And I think, those 3 driving forces, I thought, when I think back in my life, I think that, wow, that's pretty powerful for people to think about.
Well, last one. How about we just kind of, it's kind of a bit of a summary here, but what are the top 2 things you can recommend to all those here in the audience today, that they can go back to work and implement and focus on today?
How about just talking? I think we've talked about the power of the conversation. So I know that I have done it many times, and just carving out. It's amazing if you focus what you do have time for. When you always say I don't have time, but you actually do. So I would just say I was able to over the last month sit down with each of my departments and just in a small group setting and have a conversation with them and talk to them and have an opportunity to engage and just converse. I was giving them information, but conversing as well. And so I just think that's just so easy to do. I love to talk, so it's just easy for me. But I think that's really just having, like we talked about, just having a conversation that goes such a long ways.
Dr. Kropp?
Turmeric and
With the chocolate.
with the chocolate, and dilution is the solution to pollution.
I like that too.
Yeah, I like that. But I think people should just go back and try something different. Step out. Be willing to be vulnerable. Take a little risk. Talk to your team. Find out something that they might like you to advocate or to push through, and try it.
Jason?
Reflection, I think in line with what Kim said and Mike has said throughout this. Taking time to reflect on your own, think things through, quiet time without technology, but also with your colleagues, with your peers, with your family. Talk, listen. I think that's an important one. And then the other, nutrition, movement, sleep. And if you're trying to get a little healthier, lose some weight, things like that, try the intermittent fasting. It works.
Well, you said that word, which sometimes doesn't get mentioned enough when talking about conversing. You mentioned the word listen, and I think about when Ralph was hired by the Sabres as head coach, and he walked in for the first time, and he said, and this was basically setting up the next couple of months when he would get to know everybody involved. The most important thing I can do is listen. And that, I think, was very powerful from a position of leadership. And obviously, the earliest of returns are very good on that side of things, because this young group feels like they're being listened to. And, it's certainly an important message at all levels in all different businesses. We thank you for being here today. We certainly hope you've enjoyed our roundtable discussion.
Thank you.
Great. We have a big round of applause for our panelists. Brian. You did a great job. I hope all of you have as many takeaways as I do from today's discussion. I love the focus on culture and how important our employees and the health of our community is to all of us. You can have great products and services, but it's really the employees who are going to make a difference. So we want to thank you all for coming out today, and have a great day. Thank you all, and thank you again to the panelists.